Yeah, absolutely. You're good.
There we go.
Okay,
I was on
cool
my way
beans.
home and got a bunch of emails from different people. They need me to fix certain issues with the server.
Oh goodness. Good luck.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, we just got started, so I wanted to say hello, all newcomers, and welcome back, my fellow Eternians. As always, it's me, Emperor AP, and today we have a special guest, King Carmenate of the Kingdom of Arkovia, a micronation that's relatively local to us. We have, international viewers on this channel, but fortunately today we have somebody right next door in Mississippi here with us, so I wanted to welcome King Carmenate. Today we are going to be
Thank
talking. Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say today we're going to be talking about the reasons why people create micronations, and I'm excited to hear from him all about why the Kingdom of Arkovia was created. We all the time see people create micronations for fantasy reasons, just for their own interests. People also create them as like large scale political movements and everything in between. So I am excited to hear more about that. I'm sorry to cut off your introduction. It's good to see you, King Carmenate.
thank you. You too.
Fantastic. So I just wanted to start pulling up uh, a document here that I had started to write some ideas down on. So I know for the Empire of Aeternia, and I was kind of looking up a few things last night to get my head in order with it. But just as far as the reasoning, kind of why we created the Empire of Aeternia, and to talk about some of that more at length once we hear from King Carmenate. But I guess the main thing is, um, what in particular, if anything, do you feel like was a driving force behind your reason for creating a micronation, as opposed to running for political office, or say just starting a small business or something else? Why, out of the different, what I suppose does micronationalism achieve that couldn't be achieved in other aspects of your life?
I think number one is, I mean, I know this may sound bad in a way, but in honesty, it's just control. We have certain morals, certain things that we believe in, that if we wanted to implement that into today's society through the normal political views, it would be more harder to accomplish certain goals, certain dreams, and certain things that, in our view, should just be automatically accepted. But in society's views, it's sometimes a loophole that you have to go through if you're not in control.
Mhm. Absolutely. Um, Now, are these things that, huh? Are these things that still are like parallel with U.S. law? Like, are these things that you would need to have like a fully separate country in order to see realized, such that like you're no longer needing to follow some larger uh, nation's laws, or is this something that you can still develop internal to the U.S. just as your own entity and organization?
We actually try to develop it within our own city. We've been blessed. We're lucky. We live in a area where we have not much. We don't really have a lot of restrictions. In the county that we live in, they give us the privilege to do pretty much almost a lot of stuff. Um, but we're always trying to expand and get more and more involved with our communities. So, like for instance, one of the biggest things that we want to accomplish is the ability to be able to provide free food for those that need it, being able to provide land for those that need land, and built like shelters and homes, and basically built a living society, a living community. Well, once we get to those points, then yes, there's a lot of restrictions, there's a lot of regulations that we have to go through just to be able to get things accomplished. So we could technically create a corporation, go through the government, and kind of pretty much kneel to their requirements. But at that point, then we would have to be going through a lot of situations like that.
Absolutely. So you feel like it's just easier to directly connect with your local community as opposed to going through these larger avenues.
Yes. When creating a micronation, the biggest thing that we're looking at as to the reason why we chose to go that route is because of the for number one, like I said, it's the freedom, as always. It's definitely the freedom, but it's the ability to create something that the community can get involved and build something together, basically something from the ground up. Um, One of the main things that we looked at is what is it that we liked about different countries and basically glue certain pieces of it together to create a new country that is the best of a lot of different countries, if that makes any sense.
That makes a lot of sense. That being the case, in your research and looking things up, do you have any like favorites? Do you have any things that were notable mentions?
Yes. Well, obviously, America is definitely one. It's not perfect, but there's several things that we obviously love, including the Constitution. Um, Sweden is another one. Iceland is another one. Um, that's just to name a few. There are several in Europe that we were looking at as far as their regulations, as far as their constitution, how they were built, what they believe in, as far as education, the health system, all of that stuff. I mean, those are just some of the few to mention. But that's what we looked at. Then the other thing is, what can our micronation? How can anyone benefit from it? What's the purpose behind it? I mean, yeah, it's simple to create a micronation in a sense, but having a micronation online or a black and white piece of paper saying, "Hey, I'm a micronation," it's a huge difference when there's really no benefit to anyone for that matter. So that's the next thing is what's the benefits? What's the potential for it?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, that being the case, I think a lot of excuse me, a lot of micronationalists will consider themselves, wanting to do some larger public service with it, wanting to really pursue micronationalism as something that can really be a political engine. And I think not enough people really do that. Is focus in on why they're doing this and look at other models that other nations have been able to establish. I definitely appreciate that in describing, wanting to take care of citizens, wanting to be able to provide some benefit that you feel like the government isn't able to provide, really hones in on something that Eternia as well has been really excited about, and you just wanting to take care of people, wanting to provide that higher quality of life. And talking about social democracies like Norway, Sweden, Denmark, places like that in Europe, definitely are great role models for that. So I agree. I think in general one of the things that a lot of micronationalists have difficulty with that I've seen at least, and you guys will have to let us know in the comments. I'll actually go ahead and start looking at those a little bit. Is that a lot of micronationalists will say, well, hey, I've created this nation, I've created a flag, constitution, all these things. I have, this huge law rule set written out. I have a tax code that's 400 pages long. But I don't actually have any way to, start developing citizens. I don't have any way to start creating industries. I don't have any way to take that first step. So what do you feel like for Arkovia is that first step? And do you feel like that's something that's been accomplished? Is that something that you're actively looking to do? Where do you feel like you are in terms of Arkovia's growth?
Yeah, I think honestly, I think we're in the number one. I believe that if anybody is serious about creating a micronation, the main thing, the first thing they should consider is economy. Nothing in society can achieve anything without some kind of income, some kind of funds. So my number one thing was business, having an actual business that can sustain not only my family, but can sustain the country eventually in the future. So either expanding or building multiple businesses or multiple industries. So like I said, we had a business, or we still do actually, that has been running now for 2 years, and it actually has expanded to grocery stores, to other, distribution centers. So we're, as far as our business goes, it's growing, and that's actually been our income for our country, which is basically farming, agriculture industry. So that's been our focus. That's been what we decided that's mainly our focus, and it actually kind of coincides with our goal, which is basically to feed people and to live off of the government. We don't want to live with the government, so we want to be self-sufficient. And number one is, farming and agriculture. Um, that's that's number one. The as far as the other thing is alliance. You want to be associated with another country, specifically another micronation, that has the same views, has the same type of morals, beliefs, the same type of system, um, that you guys can share with each other, share resources, trading, education, knowledge. That's only going to make each other's country much more powerful, much more bigger, and at the same time, again, it's going to be much more beneficial to all the communities that are involved in that type of system. So those are the main two things that we were looking at that I think actually has helped.
And I completely agree with that. First off, economics huge, always going to be something that is the motivating factor behind a lot of the development of a nation. When you look at places everywhere from Sealand, Molossia, places like Arkovia, uh, everybody is developing kind of based around whatever they started out making money with and trying to improve that. Like you said, alliances are big as well. One for promotion, being able to do things like this where we kind of talk about each other's nations and express what it is that we're doing helps to show everybody a different side of micronationalism and a more developed side of a lot of this. But I think as well, um, having the right alliance and developing the right friendships in micronationalism means that you can expand on that economic venture as well. You can say, well, hey, I know that I'm producing in agriculture, I know I'm developing there. What nations need the agricultural products that I can provide so that maybe I can sell more and grow my economy and invest in more of whatever I need to expand. And then as well, what nations are providing things that I may need that I may not have the, technology experience or whatever to be able
Yeah.
to develop. So I definitely think there's incredible benefits to having an alliance. Even early on, I always kind of dissuade people from starting alliances and getting into things like that too quickly because most people are still on that kind of step one mentality of trying to figure out what it is that they need to do. But I think for anybody who has, some concrete idea of the way that they want to go economically or has um, some motivating factor toward that, some proof that they can make money at something, then go ahead and start looking for people whose ideas and goals kind of align with that. Um,
I agree. I mean, if I was to add anything to what you just said, I would definitely add that the most important thing, if there's any micronations out there that is listening, before considering applying for an alliance with anyone, number one is make sure you are aware what are your goals as a country, what are your process to get to that goal, know what your beliefs are, what is your mission, what is your the reason behind the whole concept of having a micronation in the first place. Because if it's not beneficial, I mean, I look at it as a business. Again, I'm a business person, so to me, I look at it in the aspect of a business. If it's not beneficial for the people, then I don't necessarily see it going anywhere besides just between you and your friends and your family. Um, and again, with our country, it didn't start off with us wanting a country. It started off with us having a business, and then growing from there. The ideas. I mean, people started coming up to us and telling us how they love our product.
mhm.
Then I realized, hey, I don't really want to live, going to the grocery store and buying my own food at the store when I can probably just live off of my own resources, off of my own agriculture. Maybe somebody else wants to do the same thing I'm trying to do, and maybe I can help them at this point because now I've achieved all my certain personal goals, and that's how it starts. It starts really small as a seed, and then it starts expanding, and achieve and accomplish his goals and just keep going. I mean, that's my personal advice. I never started off with wanting an alliance right away because as soon as that's the case, I mean, like, how would you even know how to that you want an alliance? How would you even know that you need one as a country if you don't even know where you stand as a country? I mean, that's, I guess, my question.
No, I completely agree with that. And I think real quick before I jump into a whole long exposition here, I do want to mention everybody in the chat. It's good to see everybody. We have Sabotat that jumped in saying President TJ is currently go get a haircut. Good to see you. Testonia says hey. Lazik says hello. It's good to see everybody. I think the big thing for me is like you're talking about in a nation's development, trying to, have that plan first. On top of that, I think a lot of micronations will get bogged down in ideology. I think certainly you have a lot of connection to who you are and what you're trying to do in an alliance. You don't want to make an alliance with somebody who's either one your competitor in a similar industry where you're not able to provide benefit to each other very much, but in addition, you don't want to be so put off by somebody else, whether it's their culture, whether it's their, whatever their economic goals are, that you refuse to create alliances because of your ideological views, or because of, your feeling that your micronation is doing something different, and that you can't be bothered with that. I've seen a lot of sort of gatekeeping in the micronational community when it comes to that. And it's not even like, people who are creating like multi-million-dollar deals and things like that. For most micronations, it's like, things on the internet, small developments, maybe setting up, like online shops and things like that. It sucks to see micronations kind of bar each other out of their communities and out of their different works that they're doing for that reason.
I mean, honestly, man, I know this is gonna sound kind of, I guess, weird, but to me, an alliance is just as important as an actual relationship. You're building a bond with that country and with that country leaders, hopefully for many, many years to come. And like us, we take micronation very seriously. I mean, it's involving my business, it's involving my city. The people here already know about it. They know about us. They know where we stand. It's a serious part of our lifestyle, serious part of our life that we're trying to achieve even greater goals that any normal person, I guess not normal, but any regular person out there that's not really living outside the box hasn't even thought of doing. And here we are stepping into certain waters that have never even happened, at least in my city where there's only 3,000 people here. I'm sure have thought about something like this. So to me, it's very important that when we establish an alliance, that it's somebody that is representing their country very well, very professional. They're serious about what they are doing. They're actually doing something that is beneficial to the communities that they're involved with. And in a way, it can exchange some type of resources, some type of beneficial for us as well. I think that's definitely the kind of alliance that everyone should be after.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've talked about that a similar uh, subject in other previous economics videos, but yeah, having some basis and benefit for an alliance is absolutely crucial. And I appreciate that you actually touched on as well almost the other side of the coin of that, where you definitely don't want to be pushed too far away from other people based on ideology. But just like you said, as a relationship, you need to make sure that the people that you're allying with and the countries that you're working with, the groups that you develop with, are ultimately groups that you understand a little bit and that you have some context for why they're developing, why they're growing, what they're doing. Because I've also seen the inverse, where people will jump into alliances really fast, and then they will find out, like, oh, I didn't realize that this micronation like stands for something racist, or I didn't know that this micronation, has
Right.
like a
Right.
history of like, derogatory speech against women, or like you develop these things later
Yeah.
on because you see something, you sign up for it, you say, yeah, this sounds cool, and down the road it hurts you. So,
I mean, if I was to add just one more thing to that, as far as this category of alliances, I would definitely up there in my list. I would add probably number one is you should be able to have a physical contact with them. You should have an alliance that is close in proximity where you guys can have either every 6 months, every 3 months, every year, at least one a year at the very minimum visitation between each other's country physically, because it's very easy in today's society when a lot of people have online micronations on the internet. They can say, well, I have an alliance with somebody that is on the other side of the country or in another country. I mean, let's just be honest, the chances of you guys ever meeting physically is very slim. And me personally, I guess I'm old school, but if I can't have a physical contact relationship with that person where I can meet them, I can actually go to their country, no matter how big or how small, and actually be there physically to represent myself as my country and to their country, then I just don't see a point in having trying to start a relationship or an alliance with that country in the first place.
that's certainly fair. I think I would say that's, in my opinion, definitely like an ideal. If you can get to
Yeah,
that point, 100% you should do that, and that should be the thing that you're trying to achieve, especially if you're trying to develop a micronation with the intent of pursuing full nation. If you are legitimately trying to become independent and trying to develop a country that is seen as equal to other countries, you should absolutely be striving for that because that's where a lot of your economic growth is going to come from. That's where, you'll be able to accelerate a lot more quickly. Like you said, you're in person, you can meet, you can trade things. It just makes everything simpler.
yeah,
However,
yeah.
I have seen that throughout my time in the micronational community, when I first started, it was really hard to get in contact with much of anybody. I didn't know if there were any other micronations in Alabama. Now I know that there are a couple, but that's even been years after the fact of me being here for a while. And I think for a lot of micronations as well, that ties into kind of what your aims are and what your goals are. Certainly, there are plenty of micronations that may just be trying to make a name for themselves and may just be trying to grow and see what they can do. And to that extent, I would say if you can provide some economic benefit in some way, even if that's not directly in person, even if that's just a very small amount, that may help you in your situation. But I think you're absolutely right. Having something in person helps, and on top of that, I think the other reason where somebody may get benefit from creating an alliance or creating some sort of pact with another nation that they aren't local to is political interest. There are micronations that have really, really specific political agendas and are trying to raise awareness for specific causes. You yourself describing, talking about the desire to feed people, the desire to, support your local community and make sure that people don't go hungry. And I definitely respect that. And I think for other micronations, I have met micronations whose whole point is to point out the injustices done to African Americans and the sort of African diaspora around the world, and seeing the effects of marginalized people. There are plenty of like large scale, even bigger than micronationalism to some degree, causes that are coming together through micronationalism. And so I think sometimes even just being able to say, I recognize and support these people, they're doing the right thing, they're trying to go forward, kind of getting your audience or your supporters to support them can be beneficial as well, especially if you make money off of things like YouTube or other social media.
Yeah, I agree. And I will say, I do apologize because when I was mentioning that, I didn't notice this, but I was actually speaking on my behalf from my experience. I'm actually capable of traveling. But I remember just now that we're talking to a large group of audience, and most of them are probably a lot younger than I am, and they may not have the means necessary to do what I can do. So in that aspect, obviously, yeah, I mean, if you can't travel for whatever reason, then obviously that's going to go down the list until you can. But I think ultimately your goal should be to be able to travel and physically, because I mean, like you said, it will eventually in the long run just run everything much more smoother.
100%.
But I
I
just
mean,
wanted to emphasize that.
no, absolutely. And I have my own like weird biases and stuff like that. When I talk to people about micronationalism and I say, oh, you should just find people who are nearby to you, find people who are within the same country as you and stuff. There are plenty of micronationalists that I've met who are like, hey, I'm in Serbia and there's just no other micronations around me. Like nobody's
That
heard of this
happens.
at all. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think in those situations benefits can still come out of that. If you're able to get in good with the micronational community, if you're able to find a group of people who really support you and know what you're doing, then if you're the only person in your area, if you're the only group doing this, you've kind of got the lay of the land. You can be
Yeah.
the biggest micronation easily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that is true.
Um,
But I mean, I think in that aspect, as far as expanding, as far as land, everyone's goal should be to purchase land at some point whenever they can, away from developed areas. You know, like for us, we're planning actually on purchasing land kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's not anywhere in Idaho. It's not anywhere specific in Utah. It's just right in the middle between all these three different states. And we found property. I think it's 640 acres that we're looking at purchasing, but it's that specific area for that specific reason. It has no development, no electricity, no water. It has no connections to the government. In fact, it doesn't even have a legal town. There's no city, there's no town. So if I wanted to legally, yes, I could create a town, but I don't want to. I want to build my own country. So what we decided to do is basically legally take the option of creating our own corporate entity in the state of in the United States and the state of Mississippi, and using that corporate to purchase the land, and basically that is going to be our country, and that's what we're planning on doing.
Abs-
Hopefully sometime next year. So
hey, that's amazing.
that's what I
Congratulations.
would recommend. Um, uh, everybody has their I guess their own agendas, their own way of doing things. I guess we're doing it the hard way. It's just in the long run for us, I would rather build a country where there's a bunch of houses, but they're all connected to the sun. We all have solar power. Um, as far as the water, we're building well water, so there's no connection to the government. Because, like I said at the beginning of the video, our ultimate goal for our country is to be self-sufficient. And it's not just with food, but it's with power, with water. We don't want to rely on the government eventually at some point with nothing. And that's basically our goal.
Absolutely. And I think that's certainly respectable, especially trying to tie in, the environmental aspects and trying to be not only economically sustainable but environmentally sustainable. I think as well that's another thing that people I feel like kind of downplay and don't talk about enough in micronationalism is that when you're trying to develop something and you're trying to um, move forward, keep looking at like the different places that you want to go grow to and the different things that you feel like you can
Yes.
kind of accomplish. You talking about having that idea in mind and that place for like, okay, once we get enough money, once we develop, this is where we're going. This is the land that we're going to be developing, and this is
It's
what we want to
important.
do with
It's,
it.
it's really important,
Absolutely.
because I mean, you don't want to fall in that situation. A good example of this situation that we're talking about, I mean, I know, I know it has nothing to do with micronation, but it is a business. It would be Disneyland in California, where he had a beautiful idea. He had an amazing business plan, and he had all the support that he needed at that time, but he didn't have the proper land, and he was pretty much like me, impatient, and decided just to buy whatever he could at that moment. And then eventually he had to expand but he no longer had the land to expand. So what he had to do was, at this point, he had to find more land, and he decided to just start everything from all over again. That's what I'm trying to prevent. I already have an idea, I have a plan, but I decided, you know what, we have right now 22 acres, 24 acres. So I'm just going to use what I have now. And then as we expand, until we have to, I'm not buying the land until I have the money proper enough, because I don't want to ruin my credit. Don't want to pay a huge interest. I want to do things right and just take our time, focus on other things that I think could be better. Like, for instance, a good example of what we're focusing on right now is how can we improve or be more sufficient with our production as far as farming and agriculture? What can we develop where, to the point where our process of system is fully automated, where I don't have to go check on the birds. I don't have to go, I guess I never did mention what's our business. So our business is basically quails. We raise quails for farming. We raise them for eggs, for meat, for feathers, to craft. So anything that has to do with quails, that's what we do. So right now, when we first started, we had to go check on them, make sure that they were breathing, make sure that it wasn't hot to the point where it was killing them. We had to collect the eggs. We had to feed them manually. We had to water them manually. It was a hassle when we first started, because we had to do all of this manually. Now it got to the point where we've developed a system where we feeding them automatically, we water them automatically, we can check the temperature automatically, but it's not enough. We want to do more. So that's one of those things, where we started analyzing, okay, what can we do? So I realized, instead of cleaning their poop manually and just dumping it, I did some research, and we found out that we can actually recycle the manure and convert it into methane gas, which I don't know if anybody knows what methane gas can do, but with that, we can generate our own power. We can use it as propane to basically cook our own food. As long as you have the proper amount of storage for the methane gas, you can use that for anything, or I can go back to my community and actually resell it as propane, which is much cleaner, just doesn't have the odor. So that's what I'm talking about. Perfecting what you currently have that's working, just do it better. Find a better way to do it, or more sufficient way of doing it.
I completely agree. And as well, that's another thing to really look into. Talking about automation, talking about technology. I know the Empire of Aeternia is very interested in developing automated system and developing its ability to create technology for purposes like that. So in seeing that development in Arkovia, it makes us want to find a way in to start developing that as well. And I think that's something that other micronations should sort of think about with their alliances, even if it's not with somebody you're allied with or somebody you have some set relationship with. If you see other micronations, other groups in your community even talking about specific projects and developments and ideas they have, they're probably going to have some needs that aren't being fulfilled. They're probably going to have some problem that they would wish would be taken off their back, and would maybe even pay money for that. So I think being able to point out those problems and find solutions to that can be the way that you start off your economy, and is a really good way to do so. You immediately know that there's a demand for what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it comes back to having a business. When you have a business, you already know the demand. You know the demand is if you're doing a good job with your business, you would know the proper amount of supply. You would know exactly who's your connections, your demand. I mean, there's just a lot to it, man. One of those things that I did not mention at the beginning of this video is that when we were thinking or talking about, my wife and I, about building this micronation, your videos helped a lot. I Googled micronation and your videos popped up right away. That was honestly what gave me the motivation to even do it. Because when I thought about it, it started as a joke. My wife and I, she likes the idea that I'm always trying to go beyond what a normal person would do. And one day I was like, you know what, babe, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of all the regulations and all of this. I really just want to get my hands dirty and start helping people. I'm going to build my own, my own country. And she's like, I don't think that's possible. I was like, you know what? I'm going to start doing research. And then as soon as I put it on Google, your video came up. I was like, yep. And ever since then, man, I've been hooked on it. So I've watched almost all of your videos, and of course, doing my own diligence and researching. And I mean, it's been awesome, man. It's not easy. It's far from easy. And whoever said that it was cheap, I can call them a liar. I
Yeah.
can definitely call them a liar. Um, Anybody's watching this video, they do not want to know how much I've already spent. But in my defense, we're obviously taking it very serious, and we're not trying to start small. Like I said, we have a business, we already have our clientele, we have a lot of people involved. So we had to start big. We couldn't start really small like I really wanted to. So we have a large expense. Plus, I think the biggest expense that we have as our country right now, it is honestly the bank system, the economy. Since we actually wanted to create our own mint our own money. I guess you could say what the dollar bills, or we call them DeLoreans. But so we actually have a company, a printing minting company, that's designing our own paper wallet or paper money, and that's been so far the most expense for us, because we decided we want to take it to the next level as far as security goes. It's expensive. It's very, very expensive. That's about the most expensive stuff that we have right now. Eventually, the land. That's, man, I don't even want to think about the cost of that, man.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
looked at it. I actually spoke with the realtor, and the land is going to cost us $80,000, man, and that's cheap.
I was
That's
gonna
for
say.
640 acres. That is dirt cheap, but that's because it's in the middle of nowhere.
Hmm.
So that's going to require one of us to actually go there, move there for at least a year, and basically start draining, what do you call it? Creating those water pipes for the wells,
Hmm.
and start building, electricity plant with solar panels. So it's a lot of work, man. But if you're motivated, if you're serious about what you're wanting to do, anything is possible in life, honestly.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and just like you were saying, I think it's all about considering the scale. You yourself saying, you already have a this corporation that you've developed. You already have a clientele and a business that you're running. So you have a particular scale that you can start off at. You have a certain amount of
Right.
expense that your nation can handle. And
Yeah.
first off, just to jump back for a second onto a slightly different topic, people underestimate how much corporations can do. A lot of people ask, how do you develop a
Yes.
micronation? How do you become a serious how do you hope to achieve independence? And it's like, well, if you look at a lot of these like
Yeah. Oh my
international
gosh.
corporations, yeah, like if Facebook can go around the world and purchase property in every country and can like dodge tax loopholes from the United States and like most other places, you can probably
Mhm.
pretty easily start a country. If Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk wanted to start a country, they could totally start a country. It wouldn't be that insane to do. People would just be probably mad at them because they're already starting up here. But that all being a long tangent and a rant for another time. 100%, I think having your idea in mind for what scale is possible for you is really important. In the Empire of Eternia, we're starting small. We have developed this YouTube channel, and that's been a primary way that we've gained our funding. But now we are able to start looking at larger scales. We're able to start looking at land. We're able to start looking at, making bigger investments and bigger risks with the money that we have. So that's certainly been exciting. But I would say, no matter what scale you're at, um, don't feel like, oh well, there's nothing I can do at this point. I have to wait until I have
Right.
$10,000 or
Yeah.
$50,000 or whatever. Figure out what it means to do that and to work at your level. And then once you get to these really large scales, understand, well, now you're at this point of a large political movement. It's not going to be a jump of another $5,000 or $10,000. It's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, when you start looking at 640 acres of land.
Yeah. I mean, there is a few things I do want to point out, but I guess I'm going to one step at a time if I can. Number one, going back to the corporation thing. If I could suggest people to do that, I would as soon as they can. Obviously, not everyone can financially be able to do that. Luckily, in my state, to set up a corporation is not expensive at all. It's $50 and that's it. However, how they get you is at the end of the year when you're doing your taxes. And I can vouch because my wife is actually with H&R Block. She's up there in the level as far as tax professionals. How they get you is with when you file your taxes for your corporation. Like for us, the minimum if we had no sale is $600.
Hmm.
That's a lot of money. So that's something that I definitely highly suggest people to look into. If you're going to start a country and you want to do things legally, and you also want to prevent yourself from being liable in case anything bad happens, your best bet, especially when you start off, is going to be to create an LLC. That's what I highly recommend because it's cheap and you can actually put that on your personal taxes, include it with your personal taxes, which reduces your yearly cost tremendously. That's as far as corporations. Now, as far as the micronations, when it comes to the expenses, there's a lot of expenses involved. However, um, you don't necessarily have to be expensive to do things. We actually, if I don't know if anybody's seen our flag yet, but we've actually created our own flag. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos on learning how to use Photoshop, and I managed to create our flag ourselves. I was going to go through Fiverr.com, but these days it's no longer $5, man. So the stuff it's like $20 or more.
Yeah.
So we decided just to go through our own route. As far as websites, same thing. You can look through a lot of different sources to get free websites. We actually offer free website ourselves. However, I just built my own website using WordPress, which has tons of free themes. And our theme, I just bought it at a discount. I think I paid like $9 for our theme, but it was on a huge discount. And I mean, it's been working great. So again, you don't necessarily have to be expensive. I get that there's a lot of young generation that are really active and involved in this kind of stuff. Man, your best source for anybody who's learning, anybody that's a beginner, is your Discord channel. Because if they don't know what they're doing, like when I first started, I didn't have a lot of ideas. So I went into your Discord server. I just started asking questions, and there's a lot of people, man, that actually want to help, which I love that. And I don't have a shame asking questions that I may think is dumb or stupid, but you never know, man. You got to ask questions. So that's what I would do. I would get involved with an active community that is in that mindset of micronations, then build a website and start writing your plans. Sometimes you can mentally think, okay, I have a goal, but man, there's nothing greater than to actually visualize your goals and visualize your dreams, because that's your motivation to continue. Because there's days, man, that I actually wanted to quit. You get so overwhelmed and you get so caught up with so many things that has to get done. When you build a country, most of the time you're on your own. I'm lucky because I have my wife and me, but that's it. That's all we have. And we're running a country because we don't have the population yet to fulfill those positions. I believe you're the same way. I mean, between you and your girlfriend, you guys are, or in this case, the entire empire. So those are just some things that I always recommend and suggest. Find people like-minded, find a community, and just get involved, ask questions.
Absolutely. And that was going to be one of the things that I bring up. We have been fortunate enough now to have multiple citizens who actually have been regularly contributing financially to what we do. Now we actually have a citizen who's local to us, David, in Alabama as well. So he actually just
Oh
came
yeah, I
and
heard
visited
about
us
him.
once.
Yeah,
Yeah, he is becoming our blacksmith. So in addition
that's
to
nice, man.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm super hype about it. In addition to coming over this last time, we're planning something pretty soon here to continue growing. But that that idea that you mentioned, kind of being alone and creating a nation, I think is something really relevant. First off, if you are developing a nation, if you're trying to go about that, or even if you've already developed your nation, you're trying to, overcome some obstacle, definitely talk to people in the community. Definitely try and reach out. People are always there to help, like you said. And in addition
Yep.
to that, you can of course buy things. There are people who purchase their flags, and flag designs are very beautiful, especially when they're done by professionals. The same thing with music and constitutions and all these different things, websites. But at the end of the day, if you yourself have developed your symbols, your website, your whatever it is, you are
It has
going
more
to be
meaning.
absolutely, you're going to be the expert on why it is that you did that. You're going to be able to pitch that to somebody really easily because it just feels natural. You're just explaining what you did and why you did it. Whereas if you have somebody else paid to create all of your things for you, then whenever somebody asks, hey, why was this done this way? You may have an idea, you may be able to kind of elaborate on it, but it's not the same as if you had to painstakingly, design it and come up with it yourself. So,
Honestly, it doesn't have the same emotional attachment as if you were to actually do it yourself, you know? I believe
absolutely.
that. Yeah.
And I agree, and that rubs off on other people. You know what I mean? When you can beam with pride and show how excited you are about this, that makes other people excited. And I think,
You know, when I watched your videos, the reason why I was so motivated is because I noticed that when you talk about your empire, you don't just talk about it. You actually talk about it with a passion, with that desire and that passion, and you can see it in your face with the smiles, you know? That only comes when you've actually done things yourself. When you're actually emotionally involved and dedicated, that's when you notice stuff like that. I know because I used to be a lot in sales, in sales industry. So whenever I used to sell a product, it's not my product, it's not my business. I'm only working there. Believe me, it's not the same than when I'm actually describing my own business. There's more of a passion behind that, and that's because it's emotionally attached to me.
oh, 100%. And you can tell when, somebody's just kind of giving you a sales pitch, and you can tell when they kind of aren't really
Yeah.
invested in it the same way. So I completely agree. It means a lot that you got inspiration from the channel. I know, again, like you said, talking about people starting micronations on their own and kind of having to develop on their own. Even for us in the Empire of Aeternia, I have Tiffany who helps me more than I ever give her credit for. She helps a ton to do all the stuff that you guys never get to see. And in addition, we have people like David, we have people like Steven, we have people like Richard, all people who are contributing and giving money and helping and giving ideas. But at the end of the day, a lot of it still falls on my shoulders. It becomes this thing where no matter how much you develop, no matter how much you grow, when you decide you're going to create a country, you're saying, I'm now responsible for these people. I'm responsible for how this goes. I'm responsible for, this pool of money that we've gathered together. It's people's investment. It's people's time. It's people's lives. And so I think to that degree, if you are considering creating a nation, and if you feel really serious about that, you have to think about that, whether it's your alliances or whether it's your own citizens. All those people are relying
Yeah.
on you to do something. So it's
Yeah.
important
I
to
agree.
know that. Yeah.
That is true.
Also, I wanted to say hello to David. David's in the chat as Young Sandwich. It's good to see you,
Oh,
David.
hey, Dave.
As well, Unslavia, good to see you. Baliga, as always, good to see you. 27 Kyle. Sergey, it's also good to see you. Republic of Testonia, good to see you. Sorry. Yep. And Tiberius, hello. Um,
Yeah, I'm on my phone. That's why I move a lot right now.
mhm.
And I can't see anything besides just you and me. So if anybody, please don't get offended. I can't see nothing. Just you and me. That's all I'm looking at right now.
Oh, okay. So then that's perfect. I will tell everybody. It's gonna be delayed by a minute, cause stream delay. But if you guys have any questions for King Carmenate, if you have any questions for me, or if you just want to talk about the subject, let us know. We can definitely bring up your comment. Um, uh,
And as far as well, I guess I can mention something else then. As far as the latest development from our country, that actually might be a good conversation. The latest thing that I just developed for our country, which some people think it's crazy because I am actually paying to create money, but I've actually designed and created our own cryptocurrency. I think I mentioned it to you a couple times. So we actually built it upon the Bitcoin source code, and right now it's developed. We finally created it, officially created it, I think 2 days ago,
hey.
through Windows version and the Linux version, and I'm still working on compiling and building it for other operating systems. But we do, that's something that is very unique because you mentioned earlier that you have people involved in your country. That's something that we also try to consider. Okay, in the future, right now it's just me and my wife, but in the future, we do plan on having people. So what we decided to do is we really do want to take that seriousness as far as the economy, take that as far as how how can our government, which is a monarch, how can we create a salary, a real form of income, and pay the people in those high positions that are in the royal position? And I decided that that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to use cryptocurrency to basically pay for any salary that has to do with anybody working for our country. Um, the way I'm going to do it is I'm actually creating software that is going to give them a percentage of a share based on how much coin supply is in the actual blockchain. And that's actually how we're going to do it. Everybody who's working for us will basically have a wallet that's cryptocurrency, and it will just automatically be deposited into that wallet.
Absolutely. And that's a really exciting development. I think there's a lot to be said about coming up with unique and creative ways to solve these problems that everybody faces, whether it's a micronation or whether it's a business. And I think the biggest thing to think about as well for all you out there creating your nations or supporting other nations, um, I don't know a ton about uh, the the legal aspect of employment and of payments and things like that. But I would say I know that there are at very least different forms of employment, and that's something that you should really look into when considering, how you're going to take care of
Yeah.
people, how you're going to employ them. There's subcontractors, which again, all of this is very, very general. So go take legal advice somewhere else. But I, uh, you know, people who are subcontractors can get, for example, paid not through some specific wage, like if you were to pay an hourly employee or a salaried employee, where there's a specific minimum wage and there's specific things that you need to do to ensure and uh, define that employee-employer relationship. With, for example, a subcontractor, there are a lot less regulations, a lot less specific criteria that you have to meet, but as far as payment is concerned. But on the other hand, you have to abide by specific um, minimums, in the sense that if somebody is a subcontractor, they're not directly your employee. They're an employee of themselves. They are contracted to you. So you come up with some quantity, some amount of some product or service that they're producing, and they determine what the price that they offer that service is or product, and then you go based on that. So you also can't, there are certain specifics, like you can't determine when they work, or how much they produce, how they produce that. So that being the case, there are like different legal perspectives on what employment is and how you go about employing people, how you go about paying people. So I think absolutely, just like you're doing, King Carmenate, I think it's very important for people to start figuring that out for themselves and seeing what's practical for
Yeah,
them.
I agree.
Yeah.
The way we decided to go around this is, as far as legal aspect, we decided to go through the nonprofit um, form. The main reason behind that is because, number one, we have a mission. We need people, and I think I would rather have people that are motivated to actually do something to help us to accomplish a goal that is like-minded, but all together. The best way to accomplish that is that we can do that in the desired form that we want, which is a huge task. Is I can't pay everybody, so I decided to go through the nonprofit form and then just give them, like, I guess I don't call it an income. I would call it a donation or a tip, if you want to call it that. But basically giving them a tip. So when they join the nonprofit organization, they're joining with the wallet. The wallet automatic any money that blockchain is making, it gets split into shares based on all the people that have joined that share, and that's how we're doing it. Plus, tax wise, at the end of the year, like you mentioned, as far as subcontractors, that's actually 1099, I believe. That is also a huge plus because as a nonprofit, we don't have any of those expenses that we have to worry about. So, yes, not you don't give any legal advice. I'm not either. I'm just saying, based on what we're doing, based on what we have researched, that's the route that we're taking. Is the nonprofit route.
Absolutely. And that's another thing to consider as well. So, not only looking into the types of employment, but the type of business in and of itself, the way that you are organized under the government. For the Empire of Aeternia, we have an LLC. That's the way that we run our industries. Arkovia, you as well described having a corporation, and then you also described having this nonprofit, which give you different benefits and different allowances. So, I as well would encourage everybody to do that. In addition, for those people that came in late to the chat, because a couple people were asking about it, everybody, this is King Carmenate. He is from the Kingdom of Arkovia in Mississippi. We've been talking to him about his nation, about micronations, about why we do these things that we do, and how we are developing as countries. And if you guys have any thoughts on that, if you have any ideas that you want to share or express for people who are creating micronations or for one of us, please let us know. Tiberius says, I agree with this gentleman. Unfortunately, I don't like paying the government to set up a foundation which would cover our drives, but it seems necessary to go non-profit. Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest things. People in micronationalism, there's this school of thought for some reason that if you're trying to create a micronation, you should not be trying to work with and properly, abide by government regulations, and I completely disagree with that. That's the quickest way to one, delegitimize yourself, to
get in trouble,
right, and two, to get in trouble. You can't create a country from jail, so it's really important to abide by the law, and more than that, it gives you a sense of credibility, because if you are going out there, even if you're not breaking the law, if you're going out there and saying, well, I'm not going to follow the law, and that's the definition of my nation, okay, well, and that's the way we claim sovereignty, okay, well, that makes anybody who joins you really nervous about being considered a part of your group. And so if you can build that security, build that trust, and show people that you're doing something that you claim, and you're proving those claims every day, but in addition to that, you're doing so under a legal structure which promotes that and allows you to grow within the confines of the law, you make people feel legitimized. You make people feel excited to invest, because they know this is something where all the groundwork's already been done. This is something that people have already tried and tested and proven that it works.
Yeah, I agree.
Republic of Teutonia says, okay. Kyle says, I'm only looking at chat. I don't actually know how many there are. Also, there are 10 viewers, guys. We've been streaming for about an hour. Thank you guys for hanging out. Please like. Please check out some of our...
It's been an hour already?
It has.
Wow.
We have been killing it. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was going to say as well. King Carmenate, fortunately, we were able to catch him. He just came back from work not too long ago, so I imagine he is dead tired. At any point that you need to head out, please let us know, because we...
You're good, man. I get excited when we talk about micronations.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I am excited to keep moving forward, and that's one of the things that I haven't really done a ton on on the channel yet. But it's been something that I've been trying to figure out the right way of going about. I have actually filmed and filmed a signing of already a document which King Carmenate and I have put together and kind of crafted. And it's something to kind of pair together our nations a little bit, something that helps to develop some terms and some ways that we are planning to move forward, some different activities that we are hoping to pursue. So I really want to drop that, and I want to figure out more about that. But I've always been...
I didn't know if you wanted to go into that or not.
Yeah, that's the big thing, because I feel bad. I want to plug it, because we haven't plugged it, and it's been a minute, and it's important to plug it. But at the same time... I
actually was wondering if you wanted to talk about it, but I didn't want to mention it, because I didn't know if you were wanting.
And that's...
All right.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, why I want to a little bit, is because there's... I want to try and get something out about it soon. I want to have a nice video done with it pretty quickly, and a lot of that's been just on my end. So I want to go ahead and announce to some small degree for the people here, the Kingdom of Arkovia and the Empire of Aeternia are developing a joint document in working together. I hope to actually go and visit Arkovia at some point in the near future to try and establish some of the groundwork that we've already laid in this document about that. And so yeah, I'm excited for that. If you would like to tell people a little bit about either the document itself or kind of why you're interested in the things that we've been developing, you certainly can. I will leave it up to your discretion.
Do I have anything particular that you would not like me to mention, or does it matter?
No, not at all. Like I said, I need to do like a more official video on it, but I just haven't done it. I've filmed bits
Okay.
and pieces, but I haven't filmed the whole thing.
So the main thing we had to align our country with your country and put that relationship, which I have been really excited about, is because part of that you would have to find a way to benefit each other, where it's not necessarily a competition against each other that would eventually hurt us in the future, but it's something that would actually unite both countries and in the future actually be prosperous and beneficial for everyone included. So in our case, we have been really good at developing agriculture. I can kind of say we're in the expert mode now because we've been running now for 2 years straight. Very successful. We're actually expanding. We have, I think we started with 1 building. Now we have 3 buildings, which I still got to hire somebody to build it for us. Thank you. So, and now we're going into the grocery market. We're going into distribution centers. So we've been growing, but I have always thought of the idea of automation. Now I have thought about getting into that, but I was thinking, man, it would be so awesome if I can actually have someone else to do that for us. And likewise, being able to somehow provide them or a group of them something in exchange. And then that's when we started talking. And now you guys are actually creating through your technological industries, creating the automation system for us. So that is actually really cool. And basically the automation system for our new agriculture product. Lately, I mentioned earlier that we do a lot of quails, which is livestock or animals. Now we're getting into microgreens, developing farm, but not just any kind. Our farming industry is actually vertical and inside of buildings. We're not using the actual land for farming. So we want to automate the entire process of harvesting, growing it, the lights, the water, the pH. There's so much out there for you. So contacted the Emperor AP, and they're actually developing the automation software, the system for that, which is awesome. It's going to be nice. So plus, in exchange for that, we have land. I mean, I can't show you right now in the house, but we got land. We got plenty of land right now. So they're actually going to expand their technological advances with solar energy, storage, things that I know for a fact, not only can your country actually benefit from it, but so can mine. And who knows how many others. So it is a beautiful win-win for everybody. I mean, it's honestly mind-blowing because I know I have not had the experience of being involved in micronation online socialism like you have. I mean, I think you've been in now in what, 5 years, 6 years, if not more. I forgot how many years.
So, the Empire of Aeternia has technically been around for 5 years, and that was like, you know, having like a small Instagram and stuff. 3 years really on YouTube has been our big thing. But yeah, absolutely, we have been around a minute. We're an old man.
A lot more than a lot. That's a lot more than us, man. But I mean, that's what I'm saying though. It's the beautiful thing of being able. That's honestly the main thing that I love about, number one, our relationship with our countries. Number two is the idea of the micronations is that finally there is a real progress, a real advancement into the micronations. Because I mean, I've seen it all the time on Google about micronations and how most people just take it as a joke. Most people just don't even do nothing with it. And here's two countries that are actually doing something with it. I'm only excited just to see what's the outcome of that. What's the result of that? The fruit of our labor. I can't wait. It's exciting, man. My wife and I, we've been talking about it for a while now, but I mean, I can only imagine, dude. With my technological background, your technological background, your girlfriend's technological background, anything is possible at this point.
I completely agree, and I think that's as well talking about mutual benefit and trying to look to the future of your nation's development. That's been the great thing I think about our relationship and moving forward with the projects that we're trying to develop together. Is for the Empire of Eternia, we're always trying to push toward that land purchase. That's our big thing. So the more that we uh,
Yeah.
develop our working relationship, like you said, having the ability to use some of the land to develop solar power and to develop energy storage systems, all of that allows us the opportunity to experiment and to hopefully be able to provide benefit to you all so that we know what we can realistically do for people once we get land. That as well allows us to potentially try out that industry for other micronations who may want or need that to be able to scale that for them and to be able to make that better for even potentially your future land purchase. And all of that comes down to uh, trying to figure out, like you said, how that relationship can be mutually beneficial, how it can be kind of symbiotic, where we both have different goals, but those goals help to boost each other in the directions that we're going independently.
Yeah. That's I can't wait, man. That's exciting.
Absolutely. And at some point, I know it probably won't be on this stream, but at some point, I would like to talk about the details of the um, of the automation system because I've been crunching numbers. I found all of the. I think I had told you already last time we talked. I had found some of the numbers for the different sensors and things that we needed, but now I've gone through and I've kind of rerun the numbers for the amount of trays that we talked about and the amount that we were planning on doing things. So I still want to see if I can get it a little bit cheaper on our end as far as like the amount that we're purchasing and what we're trying to do. But I do want to talk to you about it at
Okay.
some point. I'm excited.
Yeah, that's not a problem, man.
Very cool. So a
For
few.
anybody that's listening, if anybody has any questions, um, just let me know because, like I said, I can't see anything. Also, I have a question for anybody that's listening. My question is, what are their goals for their country, and what are they doing to reach those goals?
That's a fantastic question. And I think that'll be a great challenge actually to our viewers because a lot of people, I think, will watch streams and will do stuff like this, but won't actually be applying that all the time. So, Baliga said, breaking the law is the dumbest thing a micronation can do. You cannot run a nation for president. Agreed, Baliga. Yep. Uh,
Yeah.
Baliga said, in Baliga, you need to follow UK law. It always rules out Baligan law. Makes sense. Then they said they have to go. See you soon, Baliga. Um, and then Kyle said money factory and put like a whole bunch of little money emojis. Um, Sergey says if the Emperor of Eternia is the Emperor, obviously, then who would be the heir to the throne? That's a great question. So for the Empire of Eternia, I have been trying to figure that out for the longest time. As of right now, we really don't have a ton of assets to move forward with. So I've talked to Tiffany about this, and I think if I were to like drop dead today, like worst case scenario, if I had to pick somebody today to make that decision, I would probably let Tiffany handle it. We've talked about if we're under a certain amount of money and a certain amount of development. Right now we don't have land. Right now we don't have a ton to offer people as far as being a full-fledged country and taking care of them like we would like to. So in this scenario where we wouldn't have land and things would just kind of uh, just disevolve in some extent by my death, I would say that we would probably just give people's money back. It would be something that would be like heartbreaking and it would be sad, but it'd be honestly, I think, the best thing to do morally because everybody is investing in this idea of creating this country and of developing this thing which they can come and live by and support their families by. That has always been the goal for me. I want to create a place where my family can live and where, they can have a good quality of life and where they won't have to be worried about bills all the time, won't have to be worried about, finding food or paying their rent or paying electricity or whatever. And so I think for me, it would be unjust if I were to kind of pool everybody's money together and then something were to happen that makes that not work and say, oh, well, we'll just keep the money, it's fine. I would want to at that point give everybody's money back, and I think things would kind of dissolve. But I would say if we were able to purchase land and move forward there, that would be a different scenario. In that case, I think it would heavily depend on who could be in the most like daily operation of things. I know Tiffany has her own goals. She has always been somebody who has been super supportive of me and of Aeternia, but I think the reason is because I'm the person who started Aeternia, because she cares about me. And so I think to a larger extent, I would want to try and find somebody who wants to do it for their own purposes and would want to take it on in a similar way that I have. So I guess whoever I feel like could carry on that vision best, my plan is essentially just to kind of update a will, to start a will and just update that regularly as far as who would be in that position at any given time. I've also thought about, if Aeternia became something that was hundreds of people large, thousands of people large, eventually that may just not be a monarchy after I die. I'm always very supportive of monarchy, especially in micronationalism, but I would say that at a certain point, the amount of money and power that somebody would have and be able to wield over just a group of people who are subject to that could potentially become dangerous. Hereditary monarchies are something that's potentially very useful for a micronation, but there have also been historical examples of people's kids taking over their company or the country or whatever and kind of just not being able to do that properly. So either for, negligence or for, their own personal gain or whatever, I think at a certain point, it would be unethical as well to just solely keep it as an heir. I think, again, that all depends on scale. That future talks, but that's the gist of it. As well, let me see if I can read a couple more comments here. Tiberius says, we are somewhat of an activist nation, equality and equity for all living beings. That makes sense. I respect that, Tiberius. Sabotat said, 27 Kyle said, sorry. Goodness, multiple keep jumping around. Melody's List says creating a solid government structure. Very cool. Also, I've never seen you before, Melody's List. It's good to see you. Please like, subscribe, all that goodness. We're creating countries. 27 Kyle says, is your government not working? Print money. Bad ideas. But do you, 27? Sabotat says, Sabotat's Micronations' purpose is fair and non-greedy government to truly represent the people. Tiberius says, saving animals, cutting carbon footprint, minority affairs, making the world a better place from our tiny corner. Manu says, AP has to survive for the time being. I appreciate it, Manu. I do have to survive for the moment. Testonia says, my goal is to grow my micronation with economy and millenary. I imagine military. Yep, military strength for war, because if my nation is in war, then we want to still be alive. Note this was the only thing, though. I would say look to other opportunities. Again, if micronational war is something we've talked about that's a little bit silly. If you're a fantasy nation, do you, but if you're trying to develop a real country, it's just not the way to go. It's a money sink that's not ever going to provide you benefit. Tiberius, David actually said, could make it to the air, and if they aren't cutting it, make it go to someone else. Agreed, but the only thing about that is if you designate an heir and they have full control over everything, and then you say, well, if they're not working out, then here's the next person in line. Who figures out whether or not it's working out? And also, once I'm dead, like, they could just, with full control, say, no, now I have control. It kind of doesn't matter what they said. Because in culturally, you would just be kind of symbolically passing the torch. But legally, you would also be passing over, the ownership of the land. You would be signing over, the the business entities that are established with that, and literally like the legal ownings of all of Eternia. So if Eternia became something that was worth like millions of dollars, it would really suck if there were so many people dependent on that to survive and to raise their families, and all of a sudden somebody decided, well, even though I'm not necessarily the most equipped to run this, I'm just going to do it because of the money. And that would be something that would be almost impossible to stop once it's just already in place. So I I like the idea. There would have to be some like real strict way of enforcing that though. You'd have to have some like board of people, but even then that can be like, you could pay people off. That's such a hard thing to truly get right, I think, especially once you're dead. Like you won't know what happens. Um North America says hi. Hello, it's good to see you. Sandwich says, no, I'm saying before they take control, if they aren't up to what you want to be, you find someone else. That's true. But I
How would
don't.
you know? How would you know though if they're not in control yet?
I,
How would
w-
you know if they're up to it?
I was going to say, there's like world history of like ass kissers. People who would just like do stuff or whatever to be like close to power and then will just take it. And I just
And
wouldn't
then
want to.
change.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to leave it up to chance, I guess. Ooh, Arizoa says hello. How are you doing? It's good to see you, Arizoa. But David, I do agree that there could be some way to create like a check on that, but at a certain point, you are just creating like more democracy. Cause the more you're
Yeah.
saying like, well, you should set up this or that to be able to figure out who should reign after you die, it's almost like you're just saying let people like vote to make sure that they have the right person in power, and then it's just in a democratic situation, which isn't bad. If there's a large enough group of people and it's sustainable and it works, you can do that, and that may be a direction we go. But um, I started a monarchy because I was worried that there wasn't a real good way to go about achieving this, that this is something risky, that this is something difficult, and that a lot of micronational democracies that I've seen get torn apart because of indecision. And so having one clear direction, betting on that direction is, I think, important. But once you've already proven and tried and tested that and have success with it, you probably shouldn't just keep putting it solely in one person's hands and hoping it doesn't get derailed. So again, future checks and balances things will have to be decided. But Sabotat says that is why at places like England have a queen as a symbolic figure and a selected president or prime minister that actually does the work. Makes sense. David said, "Yeah, I don't know. It's hit or miss, or like a senate like Rome." Agreed. Agreed. It's so tough. It's so tough because you won't be able to figure it out. You won't know what happens. But I I cross my fingers that that decision won't have to happen for a long time. And when it does, I'm sure we will make the right choice. I'm sure we will figure out a good solution. Um, but yeah, I appreciate that. Have you thought about that? Have you given any consideration to what you would like to do after you die?
For our country, yes.
Yeah.
We actually do have effective will.
Hmm.
And the way that we've established it originally was we created a secret website that was encrypted, and where at the time of an election, everybody would vote, and it would be you would have a unique ID that you would have to log in. It
Hmm.
would be an ID that was given to an individual person
Hmm.
at that time of voting, and they would have to vote. And that's how we started originally with the idea. But then, like you said, it comes down to democracy, and that really scared me a lot. do it. If I was there, my wife and I go down my son, down. So it was, and even below that, it goes down to the main blood. It has to be someone within our blood, my blood. So it could be either my blood, her blood, as long as it's one of our bloods. It doesn't matter. It's is next in line that we put on our will. Right now we have, I think we have 6 or 7 already on the will. In that list, so altogether, on the well, I won't be on there. I'll be dead. That's how we have.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, King Carmenate. I think the internet connection was kind of cutting out. I don't think I fully understood all of the idea. I heard you say that there was, an encrypted voting site that could be put into place, but that the democracy of that kind of made you nervous. I heard you say that it needed to
Right.
be someone either from your or your wife's lineage. But there was a good bit in the middle I felt like that I missed.
Yeah. So on our will, we actually have 10 people listed from 1 to 10. One is my wife, and then it goes down all the way. So that way, while I was alive, we both agreed to those 10 people, and then the will is going to follow in order how it goes. So if the person gets a letter from our lawyer, they decide they don't want to continue with it, it just goes down to the list and it keeps going down. Now, ultimately, what would happen is if it goes all the way down to 10 and that person decides they don't want it, then yes, at that point, it is set up so that it as a democracy. And you'll just go from there.
Absolutely, and I think that's certainly respectable. To have people in mind and to have that ready in case something does happen. I think, in addition to that, one of the things talking about democracy that I think really resonated with me when you're talking about that idea kind of scares you, and just thinking myself about what would happen after I pass. Um, People with a lot of money in micronationalism have always scared me a little bit because of this idea that, people who own corporations and do a lot with that already have so much power and so much control. Even, politically, there are, of course, political lobbying groups, political action committees, stuff like that. But it would be, if micronationalism is proven to be an effective way of developing independence and being able to start something larger, it would be really easy for somebody who does have a lot of money to influence that. We've already seen how people with a lot of money can influence our elections and things like that. It would be even more so the case in a micronation, because if your micronation is trying to vote on who should be the best person to run it, and one person has 30 times the GDP of your nation, that they would bring to the table in their just own personal assets and wealth, it may be reasonable for a lot of the people in your nation to vote for that person. They'd be bringing a lot to the table. And even if not, they could, even if your people aren't favorable to them, there's still a lot of support that can be garnered from a lot of money. So I would say that's something that's always made me nervous. For example, with Sealand. Sealand actively has their platform up for sale, and that's something that's been up for sale for quite a number of years. I think they're having a lot of structural issues with it, just being set out in the ocean and needing to be welded regularly and needing to be repaired from being developed in World War II. So that being the case, if you don't have uh, uh, if you don't have the ability to uh, completely sustain yourself and completely be independent of anybody else, it would be very easy for somebody to just come in and make a big offer on something and effectively just take over your nation. If somebody actually did buy Sealand, it would be hard for Sealand to still claim anything. I'm not sure if they would completely dissolve their nation and say, well, now this person owns it, or if they would hand over the title of Sealand. because if you tried to envision a scenario where somebody purchases Sealand, but Sealand still exists as something else, well, it's known for the naval platform, so it wouldn't exist in that form anymore. So it would be this group of people who haven't really ever fought for like independence or like claimed themselves as unique apart from that particular instance. And I don't think it would be something that would really be purposely continued. Like I don't see a reasonable method for them to, not a method, they could do it. I don't see a reasonable justification for the way that I've seen them develop for that.
Continue it. Yeah,
Right. So I feel like
that's a good point.
yeah, like you'd only need to be like a million, like just have a few $1 million and you could probably just buy the platform and you just do that. You could just instantly become one of the largest micronations by just having enough money. And I feel like that's cool because it allows for a lot of opportunity. It shows that micronationalists really only have to get so far before you can make a lot of real change and a lot of real progress. But it also means that anybody with money can cause a lot of change for better or worse.
In that aspect, though, I guess I could debate, or I could mention that that's the main reason that I am trying to build a country that is not in any shape or form associated or using the American dollar. That is the reason why we're so strongly, actively working towards building an entire economy, either digital or physical, where it has no ties, nothing to do with American dollar. So we're basically trying to build a country where we're, once again, this is the reason why it's so important, completely self-sufficient, where we are producing our own economy, and then within our own community or our own country, we are establishing multiple different businesses that is using the money that we have printed, that we have minted. Because that point, then, number one, if somebody's moving into your country, physically moving in, bringing their families, they've decided they want to take that leap of faith, they want to take that type of lifestyle, they've already made the biggest step, which is an emotional and a dedication commitment to that country.
Mm-hmm.
So that's number one. Number two, once they're in that country, then, and I know this is going to sound bad, but it's the truth. And once they do that, at that point, then we have the control of the economy. So now it's harder for someone outside of the country to come in with American dollar, be like, hey, I'll give you this money. Unless they move back out of the country, that money now in our country, it literally has zero value. It has no value at all because nothing inside of our country will work with that American dollar. So that's the main reason why we're doing that as well. It's actually for what you mentioned earlier.
Absolutely. Can somebody exchange US dollars for Arkovian currency?
See, I was actually thinking about that. I was thinking about building an actual bank system where, yeah, I mean, we can exchange American dollars for our money, but then if I did that, man, that honestly would defeat the purpose of creating my own currency because then, yeah, then somebody could just potentially come in and say, hey, I want to buy all of this plot of land that is owned by individual people and buy the whole entire section of the country with American dollars, and then they come to us and exchange it for a real, for our money. Which actually, wait a minute, if they come to us and exchange it for our money, how would that even work? How would that be beneficial for them then in the first place? And they're already getting American dollars.
I could see the idea of someone really wealthy who already has a lot of American dollars coming in and saying, your economy is currently worth $30,000. There's 30,000 equivalent US dollars that develops and comprises the currency in circulation right now between Arkovians. I have $2.3 billion that I'm going to now turn all into Arkovian currency, meaning that I have, 800 times the wealth of any Arkovian citizen, and I'm going to go ahead and just buy Arkovia. Or something similar, or
Well,
buy up all the
you
businesses.
wouldn't be able to. I mean, as far as okay, so as far as the country of Arkovia, you wouldn't be able to buy it.
Mhm,
Nobody can.
mhm,
The way that we've established it is, again, it's a nonprofit. We have it in our constitution, in our corporation files. We have it where it cannot be purchased.
mhm,
Um, worst case scenario, it will be basically dissolved
mhm,
if there is no one running the corporation. If there's no one running the nonprofit, let's for just a second, let's take out the idea of the country because we're talking now legal terms.
mhm,
So as far as the paperwork, the nonprofit, if there's no one running it, then yes.
mhm,
If obviously, legally speaking, if you don't, if every year, you have to file your paperwork and all that. If you don't do that because there's no one running it, it will automatically dissolve.
right.
So as far as anybody being able to have the right to purchase to sell it, yeah, I think at this point, according to our constitution, according to our paperwork, it's just two people. It's just me and my wife that
Mhm,
have that option to be able to do it.
mhm,
We chose not to.
right.
And if we both were to die tomorrow, no one else has that right.
Mhm,
We have taken that right from, because as long as you have the bylaws and your constitution written down and you have it submitted with I think it's called the Secretary of the State,
mhm,
then yes, the Secretary of the State legally has to follow those guidelines.
mhm,
And if you put on those guidelines that you can give the next person who's an heir all of the rights to your country, with the exception that they cannot sell, but they can buy more properties, they can buy more land.
mhm,
They just cannot ever sell it. And if they try to, or for whatever reason they has to be, then to just automatically dissolve it.
mhm.
Then yes, that's the way we have it set up. So it cannot be sold if I was to die and she was to die.
Absolutely. And I think that's certainly something that is probably one of the hardest things that I think in the future, especially micronationalism will face and individual micronations will face, is that there's not really a good answer to that. I think, or to make anything perfectly airtight. Because like you said, you can certainly prevent somebody from purchasing the thing that you have developed. You can stop somebody from like taking the name over. But I could certainly see situations in which somebody finds loopholes like that, where they say, "Hey, we're going to make it so difficult and so annoying to exist, and we're going to pay off so many people who support you that it eventually just like no longer exists." And I think money in that sense will become something that is very, very dangerous to micronations because uh, that's how corporations work. There are a very small number of corporations that run all of for example, the eyeglass industry, people who run, the oil industry, things like that. You don't hear of mom and pop uh, glasses manufacturers. You don't hear of mom and pop oil companies because those larger oil companies said, we're going to make it nearly impossible for you to do business unless you are at this certain level, unless you have enough money to directly compete with us.
Let me ask you a question, and this is going to actually be an answer to our conversation. Um, the Before I ask you the question, the biggest thing that I think that, and this is going back to our conversation previously, the biggest thing that everybody should think about at all times, especially even more so when you're developing a new country or you're thinking about developing a new country, is don't just think about the beginning. Don't just think about what you need to do or what process you need to take at the beginning stages of creating a country. But while you're thinking about the beginning at the beginning, you should already also be thinking what could potentially cause the end of my country and how I can prevent it.
Mhm.
Because like you said, if you are establishing a country and you've never even thought about what could potentially cause the doom of your country, you're already at doom, because there's a lot of things that can happen legally speaking too. So that's one thing. My question to you would be, being the fact that there are so many females out there in this world, why haven't you left Tiffany? Why haven't I left my wife? The reason behind that is loyalty. If you can get citizens that are not after your country for financial gain, they're not after your country for publicity or for any kind of whatever promotional materials you're offering or any lies that you're mentioning, if you can get the right citizens to follow you and to go wherever it is that you're going and actually be committed and loyal to you, eventually it doesn't matter how much money, it doesn't matter anything, they will continue to follow you. A perfect example of this that I can think of right now off the top of my head is a church. There are several hundreds types of churches, but if you notice, you always have that same group of people that go to that church, even though there's a church right across the street. They don't go to the other church. There's a level of commitment, there's a level of loyalty to that specific church. And I think that is what every country that is trying to create itself, I think that's what they need to focus on. They need to focus on how they can establish a good, solid, loyal foundation for their country. Because honestly, a lot of people, including myself, I'm not gonna lie, I was one of those countries where when I first thought about building a country, the very first thing I thought about was how fast can I get more publicity. And then I realized real quick, it's not about how fast you can get followers, but it's how good and how strong is your foundation. Because if your foundation is weak, it's just like a column of a building. It's going to collapse. And guess what? The whole building is going down with it. So it's not important how many people you have when you first start. I mean, look at you. You started with very few people. It's a matter of how loyal those people that you have are going to be to you. And I think that's the most important thing.
Oh, I completely agree with that. So I would say definitely our situation has shown the importance of loyalty, even at this stage. You know, we've never had a ton of citizens. The most citizens we ever had was, in fact, probably the least valuation of our society, just when we allowed anybody who was a subscriber to be considered a citizen. You know, at that point, we may have had, 50 or 100 citizens, but those people weren't actually dedicated to any large sense to
Right.
Eternia besides just wanting us to grow and wanting us to succeed, which is valuable in and of itself. But to a larger extent, as we've gotten more and more serious, we've never really jumped above like 10 or 11 citizens. That's actually what we're at right now is 10 citizens, and those are people who are all like really actively contributing. It's a whole different level than anything that I would have had at 50 or 100 citizens. So loyalty is huge with that. But I would also say I think it really depends on the culture of your nation. So
Yeah.
the reason that I started Eternia was because of seeing difficulties in the United States and in the way that my family has lived and the difficulties we've gone through, that I feel like the United States has the capital and the resources to be able to do something more about that I felt like wasn't done. And so in my mind, the reason for Eternia is to provide the best possible, home for people that we can, to provide the highest quality of life that we can. And so I think to a certain degree, patriotism is good because it allows people to feel excited about the country they belong to and to really innovate for that country, trying to make it a better place. But I would say ultimately, because of where I come from, because of my mindset in, not being super patriotic toward the United States. Of course, I love the United States, and I'm glad that I was a United States citizen opposed to having been born anywhere else in the world. But that being the case, I would say in my own gain for a better life, I would expect the same of my citizens. Certainly, we want people to stay as a part of Eternia. Certainly, we want people to invest and support us even as we grow. But at the same time, if there was another country that could offer them more, if there's some benefit that we can no longer provide that others can, I would say go for the best quality of life that you can. Nobody should have some base loyalty to Eternia if it does not provide them a benefit they can't get somewhere else. Just
Right.
because it's how you improve the future for your family and your society.
I agree. I agree 100%. I mean, I always like to think of my country, Arkovia, as a community. That's the best basic form way I think of it. Especially when we built, we buy that land, um, the 640 acres. That's that's the way I'm imagining it in my mind. Having houses. In fact, we actually changed our corporation's constitution to include certain things to like such as HOA. So eventually when we purchase the land, you're going to be able to buy the land from us using our money in exchange with American money, but you're going to be able to purchase that land and have almost a complete rights to all, almost the entire right, but with a little limitations. And that's where the HOA idea came in mind. And basically, you'll be able to purchase it. It will require you to pay an annual tax fee on that land. And you'll have a rights just to basically do whatever you want with that land. The only exception, obviously, of a few, you can't damage our land. You can sell it. You're more than welcome to sell it for more money if you want. And but the requirement is that person will have to eventually buy it using, our money, our system money. So that's just some of the things that we've been thinking about too, is how can we provide the freedom that we claim that we want to give the people, but in a way that it's not hurting the people, and it's definitely not going to affect the country in a negative way either. There's always a very thin line between that, between being able to fully and honestly provide the people the true freedom that they want, that they deserve, and that you really want to give to them, but at the same time, not to the point where it's going to destroy our country. A perfect example of what I'm trying to talk about is when I was running a game server. I wanted to give people certain permissions, but in order to do that, you have to know how to do it, because when I did it the wrong way, all of a sudden I had people blowing up things that they weren't supposed to blow up.
Yeah.
So there's always a thin line, man, between being as genuine as you want to be compared to how America could be, but they're choosing not to be. And then, basically being like China or Korea, where they're not even genuine at all. They're not even trying. They gave up trying. So there's always a thin line between that, and that's where, as a leader, as a true leader, you have to, with experience, you have to expand and grow. That actually is a good point too, that I was just thinking about. When you're creating your country and you're actually building your constitution, your bylaws, don't feel don't get depressed because you feel like you haven't written down a lot. You never will. I mean, we've been doing this for not a long time. We've been only doing this for a few months, I think. But like I told you, we are not even done yet, and we currently have, I think, 176 pages, and we're not even done writing. I mean, it's we pause whenever we don't have anything in our minds, and then when something comes up, oh, this is a great thing to add, we just submit it again, and just keep doing that. It's never going to stop. You're always going to, as the more you develop the country, the more it develops, the more you bring different diversity into the country, the more you bring in different mindsets, different beliefs, the more it's going to grow. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as we can learn to adapt to it. I think that's one of the reasons why Rome was so successful is that they adapted very well to different mindsets and different nationalities.
And also, at their height, they really had a good understanding of the scale that they were working with and how they needed to, rely on and use their different, subordinate states to be able to keep everything together. And I think that's something that's really important to consider in our conversation here, talking about, property rights and things like that in your country. This is a fairly advanced topic for micronations. And I would say people listening to you and hearing, 140 something pages in your laws and in your legal writings is, I would say, because of the specific scale that you're at, you are looking in the short term to be able to do a lot of things dealing with, these property rights and with, the development of your industries and your taxes and your monetary system. I would say for a lot of micronationalists, if you don't have the deed to a piece of land in your hands, you probably shouldn't write like property law stuff. It's not that you can't think about it, but just
Yeah.
like you were saying with the game, I have tried to run Minecraft servers before for the Empire of Aeternia and have people come on and join the game. And right away, you can tell if you don't set things up properly, it'll be chaos.
Yeah.
So if you can't run a Minecraft server and you can't figure out how to manage that, you probably shouldn't be trying to jump into the technical details of, how you're going to run this civilization of people. You just may not be
It
at that place yet, and that's okay.
no, yeah, it definitely is okay, but I at that point I think I would highly recommend and highly suggest you join another micronation before you do that. In fact, you know what? I actually I think what I guess because in my background it's a little different, but if anybody doesn't have a background in business or doesn't have an active business and don't have an active micronation, I think I would highly recommend that they actually join one first, even if it's just to get their feet wet, to contribute, to volunteer, to learn, and just ask questions. That's what I think I would honestly recommend, because these days it's so easy. Everybody wants to create it, but it's honestly not hard to create it. What's really hard is to maintain it, to manage it. I think that's I think they're not really understanding that it's not hard to create it. It's just like, honestly, it's just like cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is not hard to create. It's hard to maintain it. It's hard to understand the logic behind it, where you can control the different servers and what they do and how they communicate in the entire network. That's the hard part. It's the same thing with the micronations. Man, I can only imagine if I'm dealing with a lot of issues. I can only imagine what kind of issues you're dealing with running your empire. Again, it's not hard to create it. It's harder to maintain it. I believe that. I think that a lot of people should. The very first thing is join a nation, join a country, and learn everything about that country, the good, the bad, in what parts have they succeeded and in what parts have they failed, and why they failed and how they succeeded. Unfortunately, I don't really see a lot of those questions being asked these days. A lot of people, it comes down to the thing also that I always hear is, oh, I want to create a micronation, and the very first thing I'm going to do is charge them for titles and charge them for ranking. I'm like, that is the worst thing you could do. I mean, because number one, it comes back to the money situation. If they're not loyal and they're just there for the money, they're going to go keep coming back and forth. And if you're relying on your country's economy for to have a consistent amount of people that are loyal to that country, your economy is going to have a huge inflation. There's going to be moments where your country is making a lot of decent money, and then there's going to be moments where everyone decided to go AFK, and now your income just went down halfway. So there has to be a consistency with your economy. That's another thing that's very important when people are discussing economies within their country, is you don't want to be like America, or even worse, like other third world countries where their inflation is so terrible that their money now is basically worth nothing. So you want a consistency, and that right there, the best way you can do that is, number one, have your own business, at the very least one. Number two, have an established relationship with an alliance that you guys can pair each other's economy and basically be even stronger. That's another huge thing for me. I think that's a plus. Which, again, you having a good established economy in your background, me having mine as well, that's just awesome. So those are certain things that I don't want to judge, but I don't think a lot of people are seriously thinking about that when they're thinking about economy. I think most people are just thinking, hey, I'm just going to charge for not even a product. I mean, I don't think you can consider a title a product. It's just a title.
Absolutely. Well, and I think one of the things that, in all of the things that I've been hearing you say, something that because of your own business acumen, because of your own development as an entrepreneur, you may not even think to say to people who haven't gone through that and who haven't dealt with that, but like, just value assessment and
Yeah.
risk benefit analysis is like a huge thing that I think people don't really think about. Is a lot of micronations are simply trying to check boxes. They say, okay, what is the steps to become a recognized country? I did this and this and this and this and this, and therefore I'm good now. Somebody please call the UN. It's so bothersome
It was that
because
easy.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's so bothersome because people want to find the solutions to these things. We of course all do. But to a larger extent, it is less about what it is that you're doing in particular, checking that box, and more so whether you're doing it in a way that is reasonable and sustainable for your situation. Like you're talking about, you absolutely need alliances to be able to grow to the scales that we're talking about here in this conversation. But at the same
Yeah.
time, if you just quickly sign up for the first alliance that you have, there are obviously downsides that can lead to that, and we've discussed those a little bit. The same thing with citizenships and titles. If you are trying to sell titles for your nation, for example, sure, that may be a quick way to increase your economic output. So sure, you're like, oh, but now my economy's bigger, so my nation's bigger, everything's going well. But as you go down the road, that may come back to bite you because if you sell titles and that's what you do, and somebody's considered a lord of your nation and they're representing your nation as some great high lord or whatever, uh, if I can Google that person and they're saying like weird stuff, or if there's somebody who like doesn't actually contribute to your nation at all, it's easy for me if I'm somebody who's against what you're doing or trying to hurt your image. All I have to do is say, oh, so this slob person, this garbage person over here is high ranking in your nation? That's who you have as a part of your group? I don't know that I would join it. Um, it it just devalues everything you're doing. You're selling kind of the soul of your nation when you are selling titles and things like that. So it's not that you can't charge fees for things like that if you really wanted to figure out a way to do that for economic output, but you have to make sure that there's like some additional value to that besides just monetary. There has to be some contribution. There has to be some reason that that is given. Otherwise, you might as well not start a country. Just start a business where you sell medals and titles and things because it's the same. It's the exact same. Without the risk of your name being considered just not realistic.
If I had to suggest for those people that are either considering selling the titles or ranks, um, or they're already doing it, what I would what I would suggest from a business point of view and from a legal point of view is number one, don't sell it as in you're selling the title. Sell it as in either like in our case, for instance, I'll give you my example. For us, we will be selling it as an actual position within our net worth, within our organization, within our nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're basically we're paying you for a higher rank, but we're selling land or plots of land within our country. So the way we have it set up in our constitution, in order for you to be considered a high ranking within our royal government, like for instance, a knight or a lord, you have to, excuse me, you actually have to have land or a plot of land within our own country.
Mm-hmm.
That is an obligation, that is a requirement. You cannot purchase the title, it will never be purchasable.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you buy a plot of land, you've already committed or are contributing to our country by basically getting hired within a position high enough within our government. Then you have to go through a voting system of all the established royal knights and all the established royal lords have to actually vote you in to a higher level. And yes, then we will give you that rank, but you're still getting charged for it just through the land purchase. That's how we're doing it. So every year, if you own a plot of land, based on how much land you own, we're going based on 0.15 acres. So for every 0.15 acres, we're charging $600 a year, or we're going to charge $600 a year. That includes basically the land, the 0.15 acres of land, which gives you access to, I guess you could say, electricity through solar panels, and you can drill your own water, water well. Um, I think I did not too long ago. I did some calculations on how much all of that would cost to have solar panels to operate a small tiny house or a camper. You're looking at about $2,000 for a good quality solar panel system. As far as the water well, where we're trying to purchase land, you're looking at about give or take $3,000 to $5,000, just depending on how much debt we're talking about. So altogether, it is an investment that that particular citizen is already making. Again, that means they got to be loyal, because if you're not loyal, you're making an $8,000 investment already.
Yeah.
Plus, they're not they're not necessarily purchasing, like, for instance, if I say, okay, I'm going to sell you the 0.15 acres of land for, just an example, okay, $10,000. I'm not going to charge you $10,000 up front. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to charge you 10,000, but you're only going to have to pay me right now maybe $500 down, and I will personally finance you the rest
Right.
through a separate contract that you and I will sign. And I'm the owner, so I'm going to do an owner finance. Then, as the country it's its own thing. I'm the owner of that land as the king, but the country is still going to charge you taxes on that plot of land. The taxes is $600 a year. Now, you can pay that monthly, or you can do that once a year. It's up to you. But that has to be collected on your first day before you can even move in, on top of the original deposit, which is like $500. So altogether, you're looking at about $1,100 down first before you can even move in. Then you're looking at investing at least $8,000 for water and electricity. The good thing is we don't charge taxes on that because we're not producing that ourselves. You're just producing that on your own. But that's the mindset. That's the idea that we have as far as how we charging for to make a living, to make an income for our government, still providing titles. But now I believe, and I'm pretty sure you agree with this, now those titles actually have more of a meaning behind it and more of an authority. If you go around walking around my country and you're telling, hey, I'm a lord, or I'm a lady, or I'm a knight, those people that understand the sacrifices, they understand the amount of time and investment, they understand what it cost you, not financially only, but physically and mentally, all the steps you had to go through just to get to that point. They're gonna look at you differently. They're gonna be like, okay, wow, this guy is a knight. At this country, it wasn't easy to get that. It took a time, it took a lot of effort to get to that point. And that's what we're trying to establish, is the importance to get to that point. I mean, otherwise, yeah, you could just sell it for $20, but then it doesn't really have the meaning, you know? And yeah, I guess one can argue that if you're small, you're an individual person, you're small, you're trying to establish yourself, you don't have the age limit, I guess you could say, you don't have the response, no, what is the word, you don't have the proper experience and life to come up with something else. I can understand that. But again, it comes down to, do your due diligence. Go to community like your Discord server, and just ask. There's people like me, there's people like you, there's people like David, like all these other guys that can easily give people ideas of how else to make money. It just requires to sometimes think outside the box. There's all kinds of ways out there, man. It's just, like, for instance, you can get a free website and easily sell t-shirts, and start selling your brand. Honestly, I think that's a better route. I honestly think you're better off selling merchandise. I guess what in Silicon Valley, I think they call it swag.
Yeah.
Sell your swag, your brand, and that right there is, I think it's two in one. I think you're basically selling two things or making twice the money for one merchandise. You're selling a shirt that you don't even make. You can easily have people make the shirts for you online for what? I think $15. Sell it for 30, sell it for $40. I know it sounds expensive, but if you're motivated enough and you have a good project, you have a good solid foundation, you're a good salesperson, you're very passionate about what you think, what you're saying, you're going to have followers. And once you do, they don't care really about the money. They care about supporting you. That right there is worth everything, man, because now you're selling a merchandise that they can keep. You're building a loyal foundation, a loyal followers. And on top of that, you're making a killing money. Plus, you're selling something that now has value. It has a meaning behind it. And it's not just something as simple as a title.
I
That's what I would recommend.
I completely agree. So yeah, I would say as far as titles, making it something that has some larger value and some larger meaning absolutely does. give it that weight to people. Like you said, there's a compare and contrast that can be done by any citizen who, joins Arkovia, or anybody who visits Arkovia, and people, revere and respect these people, because if you look into, oh, okay, I'm going to be a knight too, but I'm going to be an even bigger knight than you, and I'm going to have even more whatever than you. Okay, cool. This is how much money it is. This is how long it's going to take you. These are like the kind of prestiges and opportunities you need to be providing to our community in order to do that, and you have to get the respect of all of these other people. So by the time you would have done all that, you probably would, it would be something to be earned, and that's definitely a difference, paying for something versus earning something. And I would say, again, talking about like economics, and talking about trying to develop from the start, of course, you know um, you can do things like selling t-shirts. You can do things like just trying to put out whatever it is that you can to make money. But I would say, especially for those who are starting out small, and this is somewhere where I have experience, because we started out with, literally just me in my room. It's something where you want to try to look at the costs of how much it's going to take you to do things up front. If you're purchasing your own equipment and things like that, to make whatever products you are, or if you are, just buying essentially the product outright from someone else and then reselling it with your own branding, those are going to have significantly different costs associated, the time costs as well as monetary. And so if you say, okay, well, I have, give me 1 second, let me switch my webcam over real quick.
Yeah, you're good.
If you say, hey, I have, uh-oh, give me just 1 second. Let me exit the call and jump back in.
That they love you, they care about you, they
Ooh, sorry everybody. I know you're probably confused about what happened. I just dropped the call real quick. My Discord was being weird and it wouldn't let me actually get into the conversation. So I'm not trying to leave the call. I'm not trying to end that. I'm
where
trying.
it's actually cheap.
Hey, perfect.
Are
Hey.
you good?
Okay, awesome. I was trying to let everybody know that I'm trying to jump back in the call. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I missed the last thing that you said.
No, I was just saying that I wish I could see.
Well, there we go. Okay.
The
Finally.
chat, but I don't know how to do that.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, if you really wanted to, I know you have your thing already open in Discord. Let me see if I can pull up some chat to tell you what's happening. Uh, okay. So people in the chat are saying, this is why I play. In previous Saban monarchy before our First Amendment, it would go down the first child or vice president if the child under 18. Oh, they're talking about their like lineage, like how they would do that. In Saban presidency, it would be the vice president and speaker of the House. So they're saying they have like a specific chain of command that would be followed if they were to um, lose their leader. Um, Let me see if I can get my window capture to fix itself. Everybody's seeing just a black screen right now on the live stream, I believe. Let's see.
I see something that says micronations of the world,
There we go. Yep, that's us. That's our stream.
but to me it's very small. I'm trying to make it bigger and I can't make it bigger.
Oh, okay. Well, um, let's see if we can find some of the chat. Francisco said greetings. Greetings. It's good to see you. Um, Testonia says our nation has the Testonian kroon. Kroon was one of the Estonian monies once. Very nice. Tiberius says economic viability is near impossible. Legally, we can't build banks without macronational oversight. We will always depend on the U.S., Britain, etc. We would need to be self-sufficient in trading amongst ourselves, inter and intra-micronational, and even then can be taxed and considered illegal. But I think that's one of the important things to consider, Tiberius, is like you absolutely want to follow the law in all of these different places, particularly because it is another like proving ground. The laws that are established around banking and things like that, especially, and for example, the money transmission license that we've described on the channel before, isn't something that's like it's this bureaucratic regulation that has no purpose and it's just meant to like stifle your creativity. It's something that's generally there to protect the people who are investing in it. When you hear about things like the Great Depression in the United States, when you hear about the Wall Street crash and all these different things, people were trying to pull their money out of banks, and the banks didn't have the money to give them. And so it destroyed lots of parts of the economy. It left a lot of people in severe financial ruin. And if the government just let anybody who wanted to start a bank, they would have similar issues. People could just create huge amounts of fraud all the time. And so the best way to ensure that banking is safe around the United States or around the country that you are in is to make sure that there's high amounts of regulation. That in order to get to the point of being able to be a bank, you have to have so much established credibility. You have to be able to pay for things like insurance and licensing. It's honestly not like starting a bank is a hard process if you have all of the necessary requirements. It's just that that's a big undertaking. And they treat it as such. So I think if you're trying to do something like that, it's not like it's impossible at all. There are international banks. There are banks that are based in other countries that have connections here. There are international corporations which do international banking and trade and do things on the stock market that have connections between other countries and can even have connections that are specifically trying to dodge other countries' loopholes. So I think the other countries' tax law and other countries' legal institutions. So I really don't think it's as big a difficulty as you may think. I don't think it creates some impossible ceiling for us. It just requires you to be at that level and to have that amount of money and power and influence to be able to do that. It's just unprecedented in micronationalism, but it doesn't mean it's impossible to any extent. Just like saying, traveling to the other side of the galaxy. It's not like that's impossible. It's incredibly hard and no one's ever done it before. It doesn't mean you couldn't ever theoretically do it. We know that it's possible. The thing that is to a larger extent, I think the issue, and like we were just talking about, trying to narrow in on, well, this is what's important at your stage. We were talking about economics. We were talking about developing on a small scale. If you buy a t-shirt from somebody and it costs $20 to produce the t-shirt, and then you sell it for $40, if you have an audience of 200 subscribers on a YouTube channel or something like that, you may be able to get some people to purchase your t-shirt, but unless you're like really hard out there marketing it, and unless you're really on the grind doing that, you will probably make very few sales, at least in the beginning. That doesn't mean you can't go that route, but if you then look at, okay, well, how much does it cost me to make one of these versus how much do I gain, you may find that it's easier and more beneficial to you if you can make something more cheaply and sell a larger volume of it, because it's easier to get somebody to purchase something that's $5 or $10 than it is $20, $40. And so you may be able to get a larger volume of sales there. And if you have a larger volume of sales, that increases your credibility, that increases how much you can promote yourself, and sort of the clout behind that. And that's how I found kind of building Aeternia has worked. For a lot of what we have done, we have been first and foremost trying to, because of our own disinterest in, specifically the worries that come along with very large corporate structures and things like that. We've always wanted to do things ourselves. We have always wanted to say, It's not, I invest things from my own bank account to purchase equipment we need, but I'm not actually doing the land purchase. That will come when there is enough monetary support for Eternia through other people to be able to provide for that. It's a proof. It's one of our, tests for ourselves to see if we're ready for that. The same thing with a lot of our economic development. The things that we sell on our Etsy are all made by us, and that's by design to say, hey, one, this is the cheapest way that we can do it. It costs a lot in time, but monetarily, it is the lowest amount of initial investment that we could have in that. And it as well allows us to say anything that you buy from the Empire of Aeternia is 100% Aeternian. It was made by Aeternians. It was developed in Aeternia. It has cultural significance because of its ties to Aeternia, and that's not a product that you can get anywhere else. You can't copy that. You can't have that printed by another company. It's something that's handmade here, and the originals will only ever be here. So I think the more value that you can create by the time and effort that you put into it, especially as a small nation, the better off you are. But again, for a lot of that, people are very, very unsure how to do it. People don't know how it is to get started with that, or the right ideas to get involved with for themselves. And I would say in doing all of that, that's why it's so important to join. And how do I get citizens? How do I grow my economy? How do I do all these things? All of it feels so impossible as a micronation. It's like, well, it's not that it's impossible to any degree. It's that a lot of the time what you may be doing is something that doesn't fill a need. It doesn't provide some additional benefit to people. A lot of micronationalists create micronations simply because they want to, or simply because they have this very, very large scale idea, this very general idea